The day began ordinarily enough for Amina, who cherished the comforting rhythm of her quiet afternoons. Her small but warm kitchen was her sanctuary, sunlight filtered through the cream-colored curtains, painting soft golden stripes across the countertops. The scent of garlic, cumin, and caramelizing onions lingered in the air as she stirred a simmering pot of lentils. Cooking, for her, wasn't just a task, it was grounding. After a long, stressful week at work, she found solace in these simple, uninterrupted moments. Just as she reached for a handful of chopped coriander, a sudden, sharp knock at the back door startled her. It wasn't the friendly double tap her neighbor usually made, nor the impatient thud of delivery boys. This knock was hesitant, almost nervous. Amina froze for a second, spoon in hand, mentally replaying whether she was expecting someone. She was. When she opened the door, she was even more surprised. Zayn, her neighbor's 19-year-old son, stood there. Normally neatly dressed and composed, he looked disheveled, hair tousled, breathing uneven, eyes darting like he was trying to decide whether to run or speak. He clutched a slightly crumpled envelope in one hand, pressed protectively against his chest. Auntie Amina, I'm sorry for coming like this," he began, voice shaky. It struck her immediately that this wasn't a casual visit or a request to borrow something. Something was wrong. "It's okay, Beta," she replied softly, stepping aside to let him in. "Take a breath. What happened?" Zayn walked inside, his shoulders tense. He glanced around like he needed reassurance that they were alone. The smell of food seemed to calm him slightly, but not enough to ease the weight in his expression. I need your help," he finally said. "But you have to promise you won't tell anyone, not my friends, not the neighbors, not even my family." Amina's eyebrows rose. She had known Zayn since he was a little boy, polite, quiet, reserved. He had never come to her with anything even remotely dramatic. Seeing him like this stirred a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Sit," she said gently, pulling out a chair for him at the small kitchen table. "You can tell me whatever it is." He didn't sit. Instead, he placed the envelope on the table carefully, like it was fragile or dangerous. Amina noticed the faint yellowing of the paper, the old-fashioned handwriting, and most startling of all, her own name written in elegant cursive across the front. "I found this," Zayn said, swallowing hard, "in my mother's old boxes, hidden under some clothes. I didn't know what to do. I thought you should see it." Amina felt her pulse quicken. She hadn't seen that handwriting in years. In fact, she wasn't sure she ever expected to see it again. The peaceful rhythm of her afternoon shattered instantly. Whatever was inside, that envelope had the power to pull her into a past she thought she'd left behind. And she sensed, deep in her chest, that nothing about this day would remain ordinary anymore. Amina stared at the envelope on her kitchen table as though it carried a pulse of its own. The cursive letters spelling her name looked soft and delicate, but the weight she felt pressing on her chest was anything but light. It was as if time folded inward, pulling her back to a version of herself she thought she had outgrown. Zayn shifted nervously nearby, hands fidgeting, eyes flicking between her and the envelope as though he feared it might explode. "Are you sure this was meant for me?" Amina finally asked, though the answer was obvious. "Yes," he said. I'm sorry I opened the box. I shouldn't have. But when I saw your name, I thought maybe it was important. My mother never mentioned it. She hid it like she didn't want anyone to find it." Amina swallowed. Zayn's mother had always been warm, generous, even motherly toward the entire neighborhood. But she was also a deeply private woman, someone who often carried unreadable expressions and unspoken stories in her eyes. That she had kept something from Amina was unsettling. That she kept something this old and this personal was even stranger. With trembling fingers, Amina lifted the envelope. The paper felt brittle, almost fragile, like it had endured years of waiting. She slid a nail beneath the seal and opened it carefully. The letter inside was handwritten. Flowing lines of ink, smudged lightly at some corners. A scent rose faintly from the paper, dust, nostalgia, and something else. Something familiar. As her eyes scanned the first line, her breath stilled. "Amina, if this letter reaches you, it means I ran out of time to explain everything in person." Her hands tightened instinctively around the page. She recognized the handwriting now, of course she did. It belonged to someone she once trusted deeply, someone whose sudden disappearance had left a hollow ache she had buried under years of routine and silence. Zayn watched her, trying to read her expression. "Do you know who it's from?" Amina nodded slowly, her throat tightening. "Yes. Someone I never expected to hear from again." The letter unfolded into a confession, unfinished, urgent, fragmented. The writer apologized for secrets kept, decisions made too quickly, and the consequences that had caused others pain. There were references to events Amina remembered vividly and others she had forgotten or forced herself to forget. The words hinted at danger, choices made to protect loved ones, and a truth that had never been spoken aloud. One line stood out, circled faintly. If anything happens, Zayn's mother knows everything. Amina looked up sharply. Zayn, did your mother ever talk about the past? About people she helped? He hesitated, then nodded. Not much, just that sometimes doing the right thing means keeping things hidden. But when I found the box, I realized she was hiding more than I knew. Amina exhaled shakily. The letter was not random, not forgot. It was meant to surface eventually, and Zayn's appearance at her door was no coincidence. The moment she finished reading, a realization crashed over her. Whoever wrote this letter wasn't just connected to her past, they were connected to Zayn's family, too. And the truth they left behind was about to bind both of them in ways neither expected. Amina sat back in her chair, the letter trembling slightly in her hands. The kitchen felt smaller than before, its warm scent of spices now swallowed by a growing sense of unease. Zayn lingered by the counter, his expression torn between fear and hope, as though he desperately wanted answers but dreaded what they might be. Tell me everything, Amina finally said. How did you find this? Start from the beginning. Zayn nodded, swallowing hard. Yesterday, I was cleaning out my mother's storage room. My aunt wants to sell the house. There were boxes I'd never seen before. Old ones. Some were labeled with names of people from our neighborhood. I thought they were just letters or memories. But when I opened the one under her winter clothes, I found this envelope. And more. More, Amina echoed, her brows tightening. Zayn hesitated before continuing. Letters, photos, notes about people. Not just acquaintances, people she helped. Problems she solved quietly. Favors she kept secret. I didn't understand at first. But then I found one addressed to me. I didn't open it. I was too scared. I put it back. But this one, your letter, felt urgent, like you needed to see it. Amina leaned forward slowly, absorbing the revelation. She had known Zayn's mother for years, admired her generosity and calm strength. But she had never imagined the woman was involved in quiet acts of protection, or that she carried the burdens of others so silently. The letter in her hands suddenly felt heavier. Zayn continued, voice softening. My mom, she wasn't just a neighbor. She helped people who were in trouble. People with bad situations, broken families, things they couldn't talk about. Maybe she helped you too, without you even knowing. Amina looked down at the inked words again. The letter mentioned events from her past, arguments she once had, betrayals she endured, and especially Samira, her estranged sister. Even hearing her sister's name whispered in written form made Amina's stomach clench. She had spent years trying to bury the bitterness from that fallout. But here, in this letter, was a hint that Zayn's mother had known about it intimately. How much did your mother tell you about my family? Amina asked cautiously. Nothing, he said quickly, but I think she knew more than she ever said. When she was alive, she'd always mention how strong you were, how you survived things quietly. Now I realize maybe she meant this. He gestured to the letter. Amina exhaled slowly. Memories she thought she had sealed away flooded back. The last night she and Samira spoke, the tears, the accusations. Amina had believed Samira walked away out of pride, but the letter hinted at something different. Samira had been protecting her, forced into silence by circumstances Amina never understood. Then Zayn dropped a final revelation. There was another letter, he said quietly. One addressed to me. I didn't open it because I think it had something to do with my father. Amina stiffened, his father who had vanished years ago. And I think, Zayn whispered, eyes meeting hers, your sister had something to do with it. A chill coursed through Amina. The secrets buried next door weren't just connected, they were tangled, layered, and about to be unraveled. The room fell quiet after Zayn's revelation, the kind of silence that presses against the walls and settles heavily on the lungs. Amina watched him carefully, his hands clenched at his sides, his eyes cast downward like he was afraid of what he had just admitted out loud. Where is the letter addressed to you? She asked gently. In my backpack, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to open it alone. Amina nodded. Get it. Whatever your mother left behind, she wanted you to know. Zayn hesitated, then unzipped his bag and pulled out a neatly sealed envelope. Unlike Amina's, this one looked newer, though still handled with care. His name, Zayn Hassan, was written in his mother's tidy, familiar script. The sight of her handwriting made his throat tight. For a moment, he simply held the envelope, thumb brushing the edge as if he feared it might crumble like a memory too painful to touch directly. Do you want privacy? Amina asked softly. He shook his head. No, she said in your letter that you'd understand things she didn't explain to anyone else. I think she meant for you to be here. Amina's chest tightened. The trust in his voice reminded her painfully of the trust she once placed in her own sister, trust that had fractured so badly she'd never expected to rebuild it. With a steady breath, Zayn broke the seal and unfolded the letter. His mother's writing stretched across the page in steady, comforting strokes. My dear Zayn, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to guide you. I have carried a truth for many years, one that I could not tell you while I was alive, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to grow up without fear. Zayn's hands shook, and Amina placed a calming hand on his arm. He continued reading. Your father did not abandon you. He did not walk away from our family. He left because he had no choice. He uncovered something dangerous, something people were willing to bury by any means necessary. The only way to protect you was to disappear. Zayn inhaled sharply. He had always feared his father left out of disappointment, that he was not enough. Hearing the truth unraveled years of quiet hurt. The letter continued. There is someone who knows more, someone I trust completely. Amina. She once walked close to the same flames your father did. She can help you understand what happened. Amina's eyes widened. What flames? What secrets had Samira and Zayn's father been tangled in together? Then came the most startling line. The person your father tried to protect was not only you, but also Samira. Amina froze, her sister. The name echoed inside her like a bell struck too hard. Samira had never spoken of this. She had never explained the night she walked away. Instead, she carried the heavy secret alone and in the process destroyed the bond between them. Zayn lowered the letter, tears glistening at the edges of his eyes. Auntie, our families were connected. Deeply. And we didn't even know. Amina felt the magnitude of it settling over her. The mysteries of the past weren't just resurfacing, they were converging, pulling both of their lives toward a truth neither of them was prepared for. The next morning arrived with an uneasy stillness. Amina barely slept, replaying the words from both letters again and again, their meanings expanding like cracks in glass. By the time Zayn knocked on her door at sunrise, eyes tired but determined, she had already decided. They needed to find the storage locker mentioned in her letter. The address led them to an old, weathered building on the edge of town. Its metal doors were rusted, the numbers faded, the entire place humming with a kind of forgotten history. As they stepped inside, the scent of dust and cold metal hit them. Rows of padlocked units stood silent like guardians of long-buried stories. Locker 17, Amina murmured. Her voice seemed to echo down the corridor. Zayn walked beside her, clutching his mother's letter in his jacket pocket like a compass pointing him toward truths he feared yet desperately needed. The key, taped to the back of Amina's letter, fit perfectly into the lock. With a shaky breath, Amina twisted it. The metal door groaned as it rolled upward, releasing a small cloud of dust and revealing stacks of old boxes inside. The moment the light hit the interior, Amina froze. On the top box was a name handwritten in bold marker, Samira Shahe and her sister. Her heart clenched painfully. Your sister kept things here, Zayn whispered, stepping closer. I didn't even know she rented a storage unit, Amina said, voice trembling. She left so suddenly. We didn't speak after that night. They began opening the boxes carefully. Inside the first were old journals, notebooks filled with sketches and hurried scribbles, sticky notes mapping out dates and events. Many pages referenced meetings, warnings, and coded messages. It was a labyrinth of secrets. Then they uncovered a file labeled Hassan Project Evidence. Hassan, Zayn's father. Amina and Zayn exchanged a stunned look. This was no coincidence. This was a tightly woven chain of events. Inside the file were copies of documents, photographs, and memos tied to the city's development projects from years earlier, projects that promised prosperity but were riddled with corruption, intimidation, and bribery. Zayn's father had uncovered proof of it, and Samira had been helping him gather evidence. They were working together, Amina whispered. All this time, she wasn't avoiding me. She was trying to protect me. Zayn nodded, eyes dark with realization. My father didn't run. Was forced to disappear. At the bottom of the box, beneath the documents, lay a small USB recorder. Amina's hands trembled as she clicked the button. A voice filled the storage unit, soft, steady, and achingly familiar. Samira. Amina, if you're hearing this, it means everything finally caught up. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth. I was being watched, and so was he. We tried to stop them, but the threats became too real. Her voice cracked slightly. I left because I couldn't risk your life. You were always the one person I couldn't lose. Tears streamed down Amina's cheeks. All her years of resentment collapsed under the truth she never knew. When the recording ended, silence enveloped them, heavy but clarifying. Zayn gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Your sister didn't abandon you, she saved you. And in that dim storage room, surrounded by the shadows of the past, the final pieces clicked into place. Everything they believed about their families was wrong. Everything they thought was lost had been hidden for protection. And now, the truth was finally free. The drive back from the storage facility was quiet, but not the heavy, suffocating silence of before. This silence was different, thoughtful, settling, almost sacred. It felt like the two of them were carrying a shared truth that neither had been prepared for, yet both needed desperately. Amina's fingers rested loosely on the steering wheel as she navigated through familiar streets that suddenly seemed foreign. The city felt changed now, each building, each corner holding secrets she once lived beside without ever noticing. Zayn stared out the window, his expression soft but reflective, as though every revelation they had just uncovered was still unfolding inside him. Are you okay? She finally asked. He took a slow breath. I think I'm better than I've ever been. At least now I know my father didn't abandon us. He was protecting us. His voice shook but held strength. And your sister. She wasn't the villain you thought she was either. Amina swallowed the ache rising in her throat. I spent years believing she left because she didn't care, but she cared more than I ever imagined. She carried all of that alone. And she wanted you safe, Zayn said gently. That's love even if it hurt. Back at Amina's house, the kitchen still smelled faintly of the lunch she had never finished. She set the pot back on the stove out of habit, but she didn't turn the heat on. Zayn sat at the table, the same place where everything had begun just the day before. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. So what now? He asked quietly. Amina exhaled, her heart filling with a mixture of hope and fear. Now I try to reach her. The thought alone made her chest tight. I don't even know where she is, but I have her voice again, and her intentions. That's more than I had for years. You'll find her, Zayn said with certainty. Your sister sounds like the kind of person who didn't want to disappear forever. His confidence warmed her. And you, what will you do? He pulled out the letter his mother left him, unfolding it carefully. She said my father might still be alive. Somewhere, I think I'm ready to look for him. His eyes brightened with something new purpose. And I want to understand why he vanished. I want to hear it from him. I think I deserve that. Amina nodded. You do. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, the bond between them quietly solidifying, no longer just neighbors, but two people connected by truths buried for years. Two stories intertwined by sacrifice, danger, and love kept in the shadows. As the afternoon sun began melting through the window, casting gentle warmth across the table, Amina felt something lift inside her. Not all the way, grief and regret still lingered, but enough to breathe differently. Enough to hope. When Zayn stood to leave, he paused at the doorway. Thank you, he said softly. For everything. Amina smiled. Thank yourself, Zayn. You were brave enough to open doors most people never would. He returned the smile, and for the first time since his unexpected knock, his eyes carried peace. As the door closed behind him, Amina looked down at the letters, the USB recorder, and the fragile threads of truth that had brought them together. What started as a simple afternoon of cooking had become a turning point. Now, with her sister's voice echoing in her mind and a path ahead she could finally see, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a beginning.